Okay, hi everyone, welcome back, and in this update we are going to check out Algorand's price chart. But before that, I'm going to show you something very interesting and fascinating that has been happening recently on Algorand that could be potentially a huge signal for a magnificent bull run, or maybe something else is going on. But before that, we are going to check out the overall performance of Algorand in the month of May. And as you can see, according to this tweet from Algorand Foundation, it seems like in terms of online staking, we had about a 7.1% increase. And that means more users are actively participating in securing the network and earning rewards. And it's a sign that trust in the protocol is absolutely growing. So this is a great sign. Number two, in terms of asset creation, we saw a decent jump by about 4.72%. And this means that new tokens, NFTs, and real world assets are being minted on Algorand, which shows overall builders are still choosing this chain, which is definitely great. Now, in terms of monthly active users, this metric also saw an increase by about 4.1%, which I know is not necessarily a massive explosion, but you can definitely say it is a steady and also healthy growth. And in this market, that's actually quite impressive. Now, in terms of TVL from real world assets, well, okay, we did saw a decent rise of about 2.6%. And this is a big one from my point of view. It shows that Algorand isn't just being used for DeFi hype, but for real world financial integration. And even transaction volume went up in May by about 2.2%. And again, this is not necessarily a moonshot, but overall, it is actually a solid confirmation that the network is being used and is not simply sitting idle. Now, here is what makes this even more interesting. Right now, barely anyone is paying attention to altcoins. The spotlight is at the moment at least somewhere else, but despite all that, Algorand is still quietly growing, which could be a sign of, again, like we said it earlier, real world adoption taking shape. And we're not talking about hype or noise. No, this is simply building, which is overall yet another very important sign indicating Algorand is a fantastic project. And again, I'm going to say this pretty much in every single video. I really have a hard time believing that if we are going to have an alt season in this cycle, which I am kind of convinced that we are going to have it, Algorand isn't going to participate in that. I think that is pretty much not an option. And trust me, when the spotlight returns, the chains that have actual utility and adoption like Algorand could really stand out. And now here is where things start to get, I don't know, maybe the right word is weird, but do not get me wrong, it's actually weird in a good way. So I took a quick look at Algorand's dashboard metrics, and we are going to check that out in a minute. And what I saw for June is honestly kind of shocking. Let's go on ALGO's dashboard. Okay, so what is going on in here? First things first, let's just rewind back to May again for a second, because the average number of daily active addresses on the Algorand network was back then sitting somewhere around 140,000 per day. Now, this is definitely not bad, okay? But here's the situation right now. Since the start of June, the number has jumped to about 220,000, and that is about a 60% increase just in a short period. And remember, we are talking about averages, not only, for example, a one-day spike. No, this isn't just some temporary blip. It is sustained, it is consistent, and that is what makes this situation quite strange, but again, probably in a good way. Now, in order for you to understand how interesting the current situation is, let's just pair this with yet another important metric, and it is transaction volume. So notice how since the start of June, transaction volume has been on a decent rise. And here are some beautiful numbers for you. You see, in May, the average daily transaction volume, I have done actually some calculating, it was somewhere around 2 million. And again, this is definitely good. But so far in June, that number has climbed to about 2.9 million per day, which is nearly a million more transactions per day on average. Again, pay attention, this is on average, which is absolutely huge. And here is where it gets really, really interesting. You would think that this kind of surge in activity would be driven by price pump, right? But the answer to that is surprisingly no. This is Algorand's chart, and as you can see, in May, starting from, where is it? There we go. Starting from here to right around, I believe it was, yes, this area, the average price of Algorand was actually somewhere around this region between 22 to about 22.5 cents. However, since the start of June, the average price has been all the way down here about 19 cents. And trust me, I have done again some calculating based on daily candles. In the month of June, we are in absolute net neutral. So you would think, since in the month of May, the average price was actually higher, then transaction volumes also should be higher. No? Well, here's the deal. You would be wrong, because since the start of June, at these low prices, again, at these low prices, we have seen over a 40% rise in terms of transaction volume. And this is the really key part that stands out to me, because usually when you see spikes like this, it's tied to people chasing gains. But in this specific situation, this looks more like organic adoption. Like, for example, this might be, I'm not really sure, but let's just say it maybe some whale activity, I don't know, or maybe something real currently is happening on Algorand that hasn't completely been priced in yet. I'm not really sure what is going on in here, but whatever it is, I would say it is overall positive. So overall, the question is, what do we make of all this? Well, you see, these types of sharp increases in metrics, in, for example, in daily users, transactions, and also activities, they don't usually just happen out of nowhere. Now, this could be potentially an early sign of increased investor interest, or possibly institutional players testing the waters, or it might be even the result of real-world adoption picking up behind the scenes. The truth is, we don't really know exactly what is happening in here, but whatever it is, again, it is kind of hard to ignore. And in a market where most people aren't even paying attention to altcoins right now, these types of silent growth might actually be a huge green flag for us. And at the very, very least, we take this as a positive signal. And when we assign this kind of on-chain data next to the price chart, well, okay, maybe we are actually looking at the beginning of something very, very special. The point that I'm trying to make is this: you shouldn't really ignore these types of activities and numbers. No, I think they do actually have a hidden story in them, and we will definitely follow the numbers in the next couple of weeks. Now, let's talk about what is going on in terms of specifically Elliott waves. You see, if we remember the last time that we talked about algo, we were right around here, and the idea was that we are absolutely able to find a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 wave up off of the lowest low, and I was saying followed by that, I want to see a correction structure down, maybe like an ABC zigzag or maybe an ABC flat, and then odds are we are probably going to see yet another move on the upside. So what happened? I'm going to say pretty much the scenario that we talked about in the previous video, and I believe, yes, this is actually an ABC to about here. And what is going on from this point? You see, you can consider many different counts. For example, I think there is an argument to be made for this whole structure to be an ABC to about here, and then we may have from, yes, this point, a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 wave on the upside. I think this is kind of not negotiable. And then maybe this 5 wave up, it's going to be into a larger degree wave 3. And followed by that, we may see a correction for 4, like the one that we are currently having. And then guess what? Probably another move on the upside into wave 5. So far, I think we can say this is probably going to happen. And on a higher degree, well, okay, maybe these are the subwaves for an ABC zigzag in algo. Now, the move up itself that we may see in the short term, from my point of view, is not really that important. What really matters is this: what are we going to do after this short-term phase up is over? Are we going to have a sharp move on the downside, a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, without a lot of overlapping of the waves? If we get this thing, okay, that's not going to be, in my view at least, a good sign, suggesting we are probably going to continue our move down, and on it, we're going to take the lowest low down here about 17.5 cents, but we may go maybe like just a little bit lower than that. On the other hand, If after this small move up, I see a consolidation pattern followed by that yet another move on the upside, you know what, that's actually going to be a great sign. Why? Because at that point, I think we can all kind of sort of safely assume that this is a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 wave impulsive structure, which means there's then a good chance that the low, the final one we are talking about, is probably already in Algorand in here somewhere around 17.5 cents. Also, a decent bullish sign that happened recently is this. You see, in a downtrend, we are going to have a series of lower highs and lower lows. And when can we say maybe the trend has come to an end? And again, pay attention, I said maybe. Here's the deal. When we get a move on the upside, and in that move, we take the previous major pivot high right in here, and then you need to pay full attention to the shape of the move. If you are able to kind of identify a 5 wave up, that can be yet another optimistic sign suggesting the downtrend is over. And especially if after this 5 wave, you see a very slow and choppy pullback, which you know it is a very important characteristic of a correction structure, that could be again once more yet another important optimistic sign. And at that point, well, you need to probably count on a very strong continuation of the move up. And in Algorand, what happened recently? So right now, we do not have on a higher degree a complete 5 wave, sure, but pay attention to the fact that recently we took the previous major pivot high in here about, let's say, 20.2 cents. And that, my friends, in my books, is definitely an optimistic sign. So let's have a quick conclusion and wrap up today's update. In Algorand, in terms of on-chain metrics, something very, very interesting is happening since the start of June, and I honestly do not know what is going on. I just know this. Whatever that is happening in Algorand that is causing, for example, daily active addresses to rise about 40 to 60% on average. Again, this is the keyword, on average, and also cause transaction volume to jump by about 40-50%, in my opinion, can be overall a positive thing. Could this be whales buying Algorand? Maybe, maybe not. But again, I need you to focus on this. Whatever it is that is happening, I think overall we can interpret that as a positive signal, especially because right now the price is not really doing a whole lot and we are around the lows, and you cannot really attribute the recent jump in on-chain metrics to price going up big time. We simply do not have that. So overall, in terms of on-chain data, I think we are kind of on the right track. Now, in terms of Elliott's waves, I think there is an argument to be made for this whole move on the downside to either be a WXY in form of, I don't know, maybe like a double zigzag. I think there's kind of an argument to be made for this whole move down to be also in form of an ABC zigzag to about the lowest low all the way down here. So we can definitely argue the final low is N, but from my point of view, that's probably not enough. I want to see maybe a short-term move up, and then after it, a consolidation followed by another move up in order for me to be able to say, you know what, we are able to find a 5 wave off of the lowest low, which means maybe the low is set. Does this mean right in here we should go long in Algorand? Absolutely not, because even if we are bullish and the final bottom is already in, what are we going to get after a 5 wave up? You know the answer if you are a regular viewer. A correction structure down, and if this is going to have all the right characteristics, you know what, fair enough. In here around the lows can be a decent long opportunity. For now, it seems like that we are definitely on the right track in Algorand, and let's hope that is going to remain that way. And I hope I explained everything well and you understood what is going on in Algo's chart. Anyway, if you found any value in my content, I would really appreciate if you like this video and consider subscribing to my channel and follow me on Twitter. And if you want more, maybe you want a complete analysis for your own specific crypto, or maybe you want to learn some decent TA in order to be able to make good money in the markets, you can become a member and ask me anything you want. And until the next update, I hope you have a wonderful time with your family and loved ones. Goodbye.